Home flipping took off like a rocket ship in the 2010 to 2015 timeframe with the popularity of various house remodeling shows on primetime television. These shows highlighted the glam of the industry, leaving everyone feeling like they had what it took to buy, remodel and flip houses for huge profits. Some were correct and were handsomely rewarded, others were not, and learned very tough and expensive lessons. In all, house flipping is a term to describe the process of buying a house to renovate and improve it solely for an immediate sale. Through it all, a cult industry was born where people were buying the most disgusting houses imaginable, often sight unseen. This approach, however, was a high-risk and high-reward proposition, forcing flippers to weigh the needed home improvements over the budgets available for projects to be completed. This led to increased buyer expenses and inconvenience. Flipped homes may look bright, shiny and new, but may have undercurrents of hidden or obscure issues that come to light sometime later. After all, due diligence and expense take the profit margins in the wrong direction. As such, home flippers have an ethical dilemma on their hands, and unfortunately that occasionally leaves an unsuspecting home buyer holding the bag once it comes to the surface. This can be prevented by hiring a discriminating home inspector who will go through the home with a fine-tooth comb, searching for any potential issues that can become costly down the road. Mike Powell, CPI, PE. So how do you know? If you landed here, you may be either targeting or thinking you have a flipped home on your hands. If you are looking at a house that has been listed significantly higher than the last sale price, this is an indicator, particularly if that transaction was less than 6 months ago. Another strong indication is if the sellers are an LLC or company and not an individual. You can ask the realtor to confirm if anyone lives in the house. Most flippers are not living in the houses they flip, as you can imagine. A dead giveaway tends to be brand new counters and sink, but older looking cabinets possibly just painted. Look for new carpet and paint pretty much throughout. For help researching the history of a house, you can look here. Once confirmed, let's look at the most common house flipping issues that we've encountered and found in houses, so you know what to be on the lookout for. Painted cabinets or vanities that delaminate or peel. Now, that's a big one. Refinishing kitchen cabinets costs thousands of dollars when professionals are brought in to prepare the surfaces, prime the materials, and professionally paint. To flippers, that may sound like dollars flowing down the drain. Some may successfully be able to DIY a kitchen repainting process, but many will skip primer, or poorly apply the paint, or use rollers and brushes instead of air spraying, which will look phenomenal for months and deteriorate thereafter. If the cabinets look painted, open the doors and study the jambs or the side door profile. Many DIY painters will have a heavy buildup of paint, possibly paint runs, in these locations. A professional will have a nice and even coat no matter where you look on the doors or frames. When done correctly, this is a great option to modernize the most outdated kitchens. When done incorrectly, however, if the cabinets look painted, go ahead and open the doors and take a close look at the jambs or the side door profile. You know, a lot of DIY painters will have a heavy buildup of paint and sometimes even paint runs in these spots. A professional, though, will have a nice and even coat no matter where you check on the doors or frames. When it's done the right way, this can actually be a fantastic option to modernize even the most outdated kitchens. Cabinets or vanities that do not match the configuration or layout of the space can be a bit of a red flag. Following a similar line to what we just talked about, a lot of flippers will recycle old cabinetry or install whatever items they already have on hand, instead of putting in a custom-assembled kitchen that's really designed for the space. If the kitchen or vanity stops at some awkward position, maybe just short of a perimeter door or threshold, this could be what's going on. Take a good look at the layout and make sure it all works. Open the doors of the refrigerator and dishwasher to make sure they don't block each other when you're trying to use them. Also, open and close all the doors and drawers to check if they were installed correctly and aren't misaligned. It's a good idea to measure the spaces around the kitchen to make sure you can get around easily, and that you can actually pull the refrigerator in or out without needing to remove a cabinet. Doing all this helps flush out any organizational or arrangement-related defects that probably would have been found, and likely fixed, if the house had ever actually been lived in. Air conditioner. Unfortunately for buyers, flippers usually don't see a positive rate of return on things like heating, ventilation, and air conditioning units. If you find a flipped house with brand new equipment, it might mean the old stuff was in really bad shape before, or in some cases, it might have been stolen when the last tenant moved out. If the equipment was already there, make sure your inspector takes a look at the blower to check for any visible debris. If the handler isn't new, it's honestly not unusual to see that the system was run while workers were doing drywall work, which can leave drywall dust caked up on every surface. Contractors tend to do this sort of thing when nobody's around to make them turn off the systems or control their dust. Unfortunately for the buyers, flippers do not see a positive rate of return on items like heating, ventilation, and air conditioning units. If you have a flipped house with new equipment, it may have been in really bad shape prior, or possibly it was stolen when the last tenant moved out. If it was there prior, make sure your inspector looks into the blower to see if there is any visible debris. If the handler is not new, it's honestly not out of the ordinary to see that the system was run while workers were in there doing drywall work, leaving drywall dust caked up on every surface. Contractors do this type of thing when nobody is there to make them turn off the systems or control their dust. Plumbing. Water lines are a common DIY project for some house flippers, which could lead to scary surprises for the unsuspecting buyer. The water lines have not been run very much, so early installation failures have not been flushed, pun totally intended, out yet. Your inspector should look into the plumbing materials used and look for the presence of subpar means or methods used in the installation. The presence of shark bites or equivalent push to connect fittings, as opposed to permanently glued or soldered joints, are a dead giveaway that a DIY or novice plumber conducted the repair. You should consider having a more extensive plumbing evaluation done by a plumber if you have a reason to believe that extensive reworking has been done. At Red Flag, we assure that a pressure test and consumption monitoring are done to ensure there are no leaks at the time of our inspection, to help aid in the peace of mind for your purchase. As for the drainage side of the plumbing system, the house flipper may fall similarly victim to inadequately performing drain lines as you could have after their purchase. The question, however, is whether the house flipper would cure the root cause of the drainage issue or tackle the symptom of the drainage issue. For example, the house may have a degraded cast iron pipe drainage system below grade. These systems have very jagged inner pipe profiles that can temporarily grab paper products and lead to blockages. A house flipper could possibly pour a gallon of Drano down the drain and get the system working again. This would not fix the core issue, the rough and degrading pipes, but it would get the plumbing working again for the time being. Another side of the drainage piping is the waste arms and other support pipes. Again, these may or may not be aligned and sealed properly. They may take the initial volumes of water deposited but may fail shortly thereafter due to a previously unseen issue. Your inspector must be diligent about looking for signs and symptoms of installation failure. So, the question really is whether the house flipper would actually cure the root cause of the drainage issue or just tackle the symptom. For example, the house might have a degraded cast iron pipe drainage system below grade. These systems honestly have very jagged inner pipe profiles that can, at times, grab paper products and lead to blockages. Now, a house flipper could possibly just pour a gallon of Drano down the drain and get the system working again. But, this wouldn't fix the core issue, the rough and degrading pipes. It would just get the plumbing working again for the time being. Number 5, ceiling stains painted over. A ceiling stain is really a beacon of failure, kind of screaming for attention, but roofs, which are usually the underlying cause, are really expensive to repair. Roofs are a lot like HVAC equipment in that the rate of return just isn't favorable to the flipper. Most cost-conscious house flippers will opt to conduct a localized repair whenever possible. If you see a new roof, it was either really bad before they bought the house, or you landed a truly great flipper. These ceiling stains, however, rarely see sections of drywall actually removed and replaced. What this means is that the attic side of the drywall may have mold growth, and the insulation up there could be matted down, which of course reduces its thermal insulative properties. If the roof isn't properly sealed, then the roof leakage and stain will probably return. Number 6. Inadequate insulation. Like so many other things on this list, there really isn't any return on investment to be found in insulation. I mean, when was the last time you bought a house and said, "I really want this house, the insulation is amazing"? Those funds usually get steered in other directions, since the concept of adding insulation is one that benefits buyers in the future, not the value of the home for the seller right now. This is also seen as a simple or easy issue to fix after purchase, so there's even less concern about it causing any problems at closing time. Like so many other things on this list, there is just no return on investment to be found in insulation. When is the last time you bought a house and said, "I really want this house, the insulation is amazing"? Those funds usually get steered in other directions, since the concept of adding insulation is one that benefits the buyers into the future, not the value of the home for the seller in the present. This is also seen as a simple or easy issue to fix after purchase, so there's even less concern about it causing any problems come closing time. Number 7. Exterior or envelope repairs. A building envelope is basically the exterior-facing components that keep the outside out and the inside in. Think of it as your walls, windows, the slab-on-grade or wood frame flooring, and the roof. Some repairs to an envelope component are quick and easy, like filling in cracking or delamination on stucco. With those, you have little concern over the integrity of the repairs carried out. Wood or composite siding, though, tends to be pretty expensive to repair and sometimes more difficult to replace. We've seen situations where wood fillers were used instead of actually removing and replacing damaged material. One time I saw a paint can lid used to cover a prior or abandoned hole in the siding. Your inspector knows the trouble spots in an exterior building and knows where to look to see if there's been any funny business going on. Number 8. Removed walls or columns. Who doesn't love an open floor plan, right? Home improvement TV shows are just littered with success stories of opening up an outdated dump to turn it into a gold mine. And honestly, it really does wonders for the visual appeal of a space. Sometimes though, these renovators fail to assess whether the removed components are load-bearing or not. We've seen sagging and collapsing roofs that resulted from removal of prior supports. This condition doesn't always show up right away, as the members can elongate and deform once subjected to the additional load, but the load adjustment can be quick and catastrophic. This kind of work is definitely something that needs to be left to the professionals. Checking with the appropriate municipal office to see if a permit for renovation work was obtained would be a good idea to see if this type of larger renovation was carried out. Who doesn't love an open floor plan, right? I mean, home improvement TV shows are just packed with these success stories where someone opens up an outdated dump and turns it into a gold mine. Honestly, it really does wonders for the visual appeal of a space. But sometimes, these renovators forget to check whether the walls or columns they're removing are actually load-bearing. We've seen sagging and even collapsing roofs when those supports are taken out without the proper assessment. The thing is, this problem doesn't always show up right away. Those structural members can slowly elongate and deform under the extra load, but sometimes, the failure can be quick and, well, catastrophic. This sort of work is definitely best left to the professionals. Number 9. Awkward building additions or enclosures. Listing a house with 4 bedrooms and 3 bathrooms might sound a whole lot more enticing than calling it a 3-bedroom. 3-bath with an attached garage or patio. Patios and attached garages are super tempting for flippers looking to squeeze out that crucial extra bedroom, or maybe a man cave. If you want a deeper dive into the pros and cons of this kind of build-out, you can check out our prior article on the topic. At a high level though, some of the defects you can run into are loss of on-site storage, awkward layouts, poor HVAC design or installation, and inadequate insulation. Keep in mind these additions are pretty expensive to do the right way, and if they don't have the proper permits, you could end up being required to bring everything up to code, which can get really pricey. So a contractor should definitely be brought in to evaluate any known additions, just to make sure everything's up to current building codes. So, when it comes to lesser flip house concerns, electrical in most flipped houses tends to be up to par. I think even house flippers know the liability and safety that comes with subpar electrical work, you know? I do not see any reasons why the concern for structural elements gets raised with house flipping, with the one exception being the removed support element that we discussed above. Honestly, I think a house flipper of any level of experience would know not to mess with structural elements, but I also believe that the incidence of them not knowing to mess with it is pretty comparable to the general public. Electrical in most flipped houses tends to be up to par. I think even house flippers know the liability and safety that comes with subpar electrical work. I do not see any reasons why the concern for structural elements gets raised with house flipping, with the one exception being the removed support element discussed above. I think a house flipper of any level of experience would know not to mess with structural elements, but I also believe that the incidence of them not knowing to mess with it is comparable to the general public. Just a couple of final comments here. This article was written fairly negatively to illustrate what can and sometimes does go wrong. But often, a flipped house is done very well by a professional flipper who does this for a living. They have the materials and manpower to pull it off very efficiently and cost-effectively. This provides you an opportunity to secure your dream house quicker and cheaper than if you buy the rundown prior version yourself. You get a move-in ready house of your dreams and avoid the 6 to 12 months of dust, debris, and your home being torn apart and looking like a construction zone. Buying a flipped house is a great opportunity, and armed with a strong and knowledgeable inspector, you can really get a great value in the process. A strong line of defense in purchasing a flipped house is to ask for disclosures on the work done, which they likely do not have to provide. In the event this is not provided, an even stronger line of defense is to check the permitting history versus prior real estate listing photos. Yeah, you can find this online or you can ask your realtor to look into it for you. If you see items replaced that were not permitted, it warrants a requirement that permits be pulled or closed with the municipality to ensure proper installation. A lack of permit history may mean that work was done by parties incapable of pulling permits, as most reputable businesses would be inclined to do things the right way. In this scenario, you may want to call in various tradesmen to inspect the components. Be aware, however, that tradesmen, just like your home inspectors, are limited to the items they can see, touch, or feel, and will not be able to inform you of hazards lurking within the walls and invisible.